And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. We're going to spend some time looking at a lot of different issues. I might just mention that oftentimes in this first hour we have Jonathan Saenz with us, but it turns out in this particular case he'll be with us in the next hour, even though we oftentimes talk about Texas stories, and certainly one that started in Texas was the whole issue of Chick-fil-A, but it has become a national program. And to have Jonathan Saenz, Jeremy Dys, and Kelly Shackelford at the same time, I'm just going to sit back and let three very smart lawyers talk about some of these issues. They'll just be with us for a short time, but I thought it'd be kind of an interesting look at something which we kind of talked about first, primarily as a Texas story, and then focused on some of the national implications, and certainly that is the case. Let me just mention, too, that we want to give you an update on a couple of these cases, and we may do that again later in the third hour, just because many people that are listening in the third hour don't hear this first hour. So we'll give you that update, but also on point two, a very good article. It was a series of interviews actually done with David French, of course, has been on the program, been in the studio with us as well, about this whole idea of religious freedom and how that's being influenced both in the courts and the media. So that is certainly a topic we'll get into. The big tech issue is an issue, and I can't wait in just a few minutes to hear Kelly Shackelford's comments from the Attorney General William Barr about, I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. Yes, it is. And it was a bombshell that I don't think too many people saw coming. But, Kelly, I got to hold this one up. Here's a picture of Linus, the individual that many people have been asking about this week. And if they went to your luncheon yesterday, which I was able to do so, I want to thank, by the way, Dr. Merrill Matthews for covering for me when I was at that luncheon. Linus, of course, tells the Christmas story. Well, no problem, but unfortunately, Joan Wilson and Wilma Wells found themselves in a very difficult situation in this health center in Michigan, basically their own home, if you want to think about it in that regard. And a lot of people said, okay, what's happened to the two criminals? And I'm doing this.
Yeah, everybody has to look at their picture and see these troublemakers, these women who dared to read stories to children in their home. First, of course, it was Christmas time, and so they said, well, do you know the story of Christmas? Do you know the basis for Christmas? Which is what any good educator would do. And they're just reading books. And they were told, oh, no, we're not going there. That's what the government officials said. And then as they start reading the Christmas story, the Charlie Brown Christmas story, they shut it down because they're going to get to Linus, who's going to mention Scripture, and they whisk the kids out of the room like, the place was on fire. And they order these women not to say these things. This is their home.
Yes.
They have a right to read the Charlie Brown Christmas story in their home. So it's incredible. If this is one of those things, if you're listening, I don't want you to wreck now, so you do this later, but if you're in a car, but you've got to get this, and you've got to send this link to other people so they can see that this kind of thing is happening. And we need to stop it. It's happening. We've got a number of cases right now with senior living facilities where they're being told they can't have Bible studies. They can't sing gospel songs on their piano. There are common area rooms that everybody gets to use unless you want to use it for a Bible study. That's all illegal, and this is happening to our seniors all across the country, and we need to make sure people know this is not legal.
Yes.
Housing discrimination on the basis of religion is illegal. It's a federal violation, and we need to make sure we stop this because it is happening all over the country. Almost everybody listening to this has somebody they know.
Yes, in some kind
that
of
is in that facility.
Yeah.
And if not, you're going to be in there. Okay, so let's make sure we don't allow what is being attempted right now to occur.
Well, and again, I'm a deacon, so I go in at least every other month to some of these facilities and meet these people. And I began to realize, as you were saying, this really is their home because many of them never will be able to leave that home. If they're especially in a mental facility for some, maybe because they have Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that, they will never leave that home again. Even if they are lucid, If they have any kind of disability,
That's
they
right.
rarely go out of that home. And so when you say you can't use the common area, or in one case, you can't even use your own apartment,
Yes.
you can see how this is more draconian than some of the totalitarian stories we've heard out of the former Soviet Union.
It's frightening. I mean, when we had the first, we mentioned this one from Kalkaska, from Michigan.
Right.
But we have one in Florida, the
Right.
Donna Dunbar case. We have one in Virginia. There's another one that just popped up in California. I mean, this is everywhere. There are millions and millions of people in these facilities, and we've got to make sure. I mean, this is really cruel, I think. I mean, whether you're trying to be or not. I mean, the fact that and just think of this, if you're listening to this, that you're in a facility like this and you can't go anywhere. And you're told you can never have any religious activity again. I mean, that's just, it's so wrong on so many levels. We have to make sure we put an end to this. And the good news is, with the Michigan situation, is we now have an apology from the government there saying that they should not have done this to these two women. And if you want to see hardened criminals in our age, go look at this link and look at these women.
Yeah.
And there's no way you can't,
Just
I don't
smile.
know. Yeah,
Or
you're
laugh.
going to post it somewhere and say, really?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, because you're going to look at this picture and go, these are the new criminals? The Charlie Brown leaders from the senior center? It's an incredible example of how foolish things are getting, but how deadly serious it is with what they're trying to do to these seniors in these facilities around the country.
We also have a link to firstliberty.org, and you'll see the first one there is about Chick-fil-A, which is something we'll get to a little bit later. But again, I would highly recommend this one because it's Christian Post, because it also has 20 different endnotes. It's got as much documentation as what you lawyers provide sometimes in some of these things. So if anybody goes, whoa, wait a minute, I need to read this for myself, although I think most people are just going to roll their eyes and say, I can't even believe we're talking about this. That is the case. And we might even remind that since a lot of our listeners are in the Dallas area, that one of the first of these centers you ever worked with was just down the road from where the studio is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, again, we've seen this happen for some time. But there are two areas which we will talk about today. One is what happens when they tell you in your own home you can't pray, you can't play music, whatever it might be. The other is what do they say when you are in your profession and you can't do that.
That's right.
And, of course, that's something we've been talking about with Jonathan Saenz, and also we'll be talking about that with, of course, Kelly Shackelford and Jeremy Dys. And as you go to the website, you'll know something else, and that is those of us that went to the luncheon yesterday talked about 30 years. You don't even seem that old, but after all, 30 years here of the history of Kelly Shackelford, 30 years of fighting and 30 years of leading the fight, and everyone's free to go do great things. And so that is on the website as well, and so you'll see that link as well that is available. But if you want to know a little bit more about this story, that is the case. I saved a second one, which we've also put here. Remember that Bible on the remembrance table? What happened with that one? So when we come back from the break, we'll give you an update on that, and then we'll get into some of these other issues. And, of course, later, Jonathan Saenz will be joining us, and we'll talk about the Chick-fil-A issue, which is an issue that everybody's been paying attention to. Started kind of as a Texas story. Now it's become a national story. We'll continue our conversation right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Dennis Prager has a phrase that he's been using for some time. He says the left ruins everything. That is the title of a recent PragerU video by him. It surfaced in a recent commentary by him with the title, How the Left Keeps Me Religious. I really questioned his phrase the first few times I heard him say it. Perhaps it was the realization that every generalization has exceptions. But Dennis Prager is a thoughtful person, so I didn't reject the idea immediately. It is important to understand that Prager makes a distinction between liberalism and the left. Liberals and conservatives value truth. The left does not. And in his recent commentary, he acknowledges that liberals have done some good, but he then adds everything the left has touched, it has ruined. The most obvious example, he says, is the university. Harvard professor Steven Pinker, a liberal and an atheist, says the left has rendered the university a laughingstock. If you've been reading my commentaries for any length of time, you've heard me cite many examples, and Dennis Prager accuses the university of teaching gullible young students lies, immoral ideas, and foolish doctrines, and then goes on for 6 paragraphs with awful examples of what is taught on campus today. One example from his video that is briefly mentioned in his commentary is what the left has done to the arts. The God-centered West produced Bach and Michelangelo. By contrast, the left has produced mostly junk. He says there's nothing higher to aspire to because the focus is often merely to shock, not to inspire. In fact, there's a large amount of so-called art that is nothing more than scatological art. The Bible and a belief in God were important in the formation of Western culture and in the creation of America. Rejection of those ideas has given us a leftist perspective that seems to be trying to ruin everything. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From 20th Century Fox and Franklin Entertainment, Breakthrough, starring Chrissy Metz, based on a true story. Breakthrough, rated PG, in theaters Wednesday, April 17th. Point of View, Truth Team 360.
Hi, everybody. This is Gary Bauer with American Values in Washington, D.C. You know, I've been involved in big battles in Washington for many, many years. And in those battles, time and time again, it's been Point of View Radio and Kerby Anderson who's provided me with a platform to sound the alarm. It doesn't matter whether the battle was over the sanctity of human life or preserving religious liberty or defending marriage. Kerby Anderson and Point of View have always been there standing strong. That's why today I'm asking you to join me in giving the most generous contribution you can to Point of View Radio. You know, Point of View and Kerby don't get big subsidies from Washington, D.C. like some liberals do. They depend on generous donors like you who believe in family, faith, and freedom.
Point of View, Truth Team 360.
Last week, as we mentioned, of course, we had our Truth Team Weekend. If you have not joined with us, I just wanted to give you one more opportunity. That's, again, kind of winding down from what took place last week. And if you can help us out, visit the website, pointofview.net. You'll see a button there that says Join the Team now. And I would encourage you to do so for as little as $1 a day, $30 a month. You can join with us, or even a one-time gift. If nothing else, as you're hearing the story about this Michigan center where these two criminals, I'm putting air quotes here, Joan Wilson and Wilma Wells, were vindicated. That is the case. So Kelly Shackelford with me and Jeremy Dys. And Jeremy, let's get to another story, which you reminded us when you were on a couple of weeks ago, that we actually heard about this story from one of our listeners to Point of View.
Yeah, no, it's great to have listeners all over the country who are shaking down the trees there to stir out a few cases for us. So keep it up. If you hear about things going on in your backyard, sometimes we don't see them, and we want to make sure we can help as many people as we can. Go to firstliberty.org, give us a call, let us see if we can help you out. But this MIA case, people are familiar, I'm sure, with the MIA tables, right? You've probably seen them. It's an empty chair to symbolize the person who's not with us here, and it's got a table setting that has a lot of symbolism involved with it as well, but it also usually contains a Bible, which symbolizes the faith and the hope that those who are missing might return, and those who are prisoners of war held on to while they were in those POW camps. And so this is a very typical display around the country in many, many different contexts, and it certainly gets the ire up of one Mikey Weinstein. And repeatedly that happens, where he will send this a nastygram somewhere to some outlying VA clinic or military base, shoot, he'd probably even try to do it at Chick-fil-A if they set up a missing man table there as well. So, I mean, he tries to do it everywhere. And he sent one here to a veterans clinic in New Hampshire. And we sent a letter right after that to point out to the clinic there that, hey, you guys are perfectly fine. You're on steady ground here. There's no problem with this at all. Just go ahead and put the Bible back onto it. And this one, it was actually pretty interesting in that the Bible was actually donated by an actual veteran himself who was held captive as a German prisoner of war in a German prisoner of war camp during World War II. So that was even more historically significant, that that Bible that apparently this gentleman found to be very, very important to him during his captivity was being used then as a display for those who are to be remembered on things. But the good news is that someone here tipped us off to that issue. We took action on it, and thankfully we're here to report now that the VA put it back in there, and that Bible that was once in the hands of a prisoner of war is now remembering many prisoners of war and those who are missing in action on that table today in New Hampshire.
Well, if nothing else, Kelly, you weren't here when we did that, but also when we had Jeremy talk about that, we had one of our callers call in and say, well, I saw this on this news, and the news actually told us about the Bible, so it was interesting, but they said you filled in some of the gaps on some of that. But it's just one more example of the fact that every time we turn around, you guys are winning something else, aren't you?
Well, look, a couple of things I would like to point out about this. Number one, notice that Mikey Weinstein and his group, are they filing a lawsuit? This is what these groups do. They threaten, they send letters, they're wrong about the law, and the question is, are people going to fold? Are they going to, are they going to really take away religious freedom and religious history and heritage just because they're intimidated? And so if you look at the end of these threats, there's never a lawsuit. And Mikey Weinstein doesn't win lawsuits. He just threatens. So I would want people to notice that, number one. But number two, the tactic being used here, and this would apply way beyond just military, but for people who want to censor religion and religious freedom and don't want any religious expression to occur except in the corners of your home in the dark, this is the tactic they use. Well, it's a Bible. You can't pick a religious symbol without it being some particular religion. There aren't any religious symbols that represent all religions.
Yeah, they say it's a sectarian symbol, but everything is. A Quran is, a Bible is.
Exactly.
Right?
So that's the same
Yeah.
problem. Why do we have to tear down the Bladensburg Veterans Memorial? Because it's a cross. Well, it would have been okay if it was a Star of David. No, that's sectarian. I mean, there's no way. And so this is just a little trick that they tear down and push out all religious heritage, all religious history, all religious freedom out of the public life. Mm-hmm. And it's not what the law is. It's not what the Constitution says. That Bible was not there to say we at the VA are pro-Christian. Everybody knows that. They're saying this is a Bible because we're remembering, we're praying for these people. We're faith is an important part of serving in the military. And, of course, in this case, this was the Bible somebody actually used as, their thing that got them through being, a prisoner. So just realize when you hear this in your community, whether it's in your schools or whether, if they use this, but it's a particular religion, that's just a trick to try to ban religion. And it's not what the law says.
And they're trying to do it in something of a professional way. But every once in a while, the mask is removed. Kelly, you missed this because you were nice and warm inside the Supreme Court of the United States. But I was outside in the freezing cold air listening to what was going on in the plaza during the oral argument of this Bladensburg matter. And remember, this is that memorial to 49 men from Prince George's County, Maryland, in the shape of a cross, like the gravestones were, right?
There we go.
And so what was happening outside was this kind of, I hesitate to call it a rally. It was kind of a protest of people who were, the people who were listening were paid to be there. The speakers themselves ranged from every single group you can imagine in the alphabet soup on the left. They were all there, and they're all speaking to each other, kind of, rallying each other's confidence and how bad of a decision this could be. Well, the Mikey Weinstein was actually there as well, and he spoke. And one of the things he explained was that this memorial, this cross-shaped Veterans Memorial down in Bladensburg, Maryland, was, and I'm quoting, a gang symbol of Christianity.
Yes, I remember hearing that.
And so there's not even a recognition that this is precious to some people. For him, it is nothing more than a gang symbol of Christianity. And what that says of people who actually do follow the religion of Christianity is that they are equivalent to the Bloods and the Crips and the rest of the murderous lots of gangs around the country. That level of vitriol has no business in the public discourse, and it certainly is not something that we ought to be encouraging to take place, and nor should it be something that when they receive these letters in different places that they should forget.
Yes. Let me just mention, I always like to give you some action items, and one is if you know somebody in the military, I think they'd be very encouraged by this. In just a few minutes, we're going to talk about some other people in the military, like Wes Motter and Philip Monk and some of those, but if you know somebody here, this would be an encouragement to them. So this particular link takes you to First Liberty. This one we mentioned just a minute ago takes you to Christian Post, but this one will take you to First Liberty. Click on that and maybe hit the share button or copy it and put it on your Facebook page or something like that, because you know as well as I do, through your sphere of influence, there may be some others that are doing a POW MIA table, and they're going to get threatened, and they just need to know that they don't have to do anything other than take that piece of paper and put it where it belongs, as you know. And so that's just another action item that I think would be helpful. Don't you think?
Look, it is absolutely helpful that way. And remember that this is not just the only place you're going to see that. Look, in the last 3 weeks, I think I've sent 4 letters in opposition to the Freedom from Religion Foundation letters. One of them was to a committee in Massachusetts who was thinking about giving a historic preservation grant to a church there so the steeple wouldn't fall over. And the FFRF got all upset about that. And we said, no, that's perfectly fine. Well, that letter helped pass that vote along. And so that's going forward. But I've had to, this one should be a slam dunk. I've had to send 3 different letters countering absolutely false information from the other side that says you can't pray in front of legislative meetings. That has been twice settled by the Supreme Court of the United States. One of those letters was in Ohio, which is in the Sixth Circuit, and there is a great opinion on point in that case, so that we ran in the Sixth Circuit that says that not only can you pray, the citizen, but so can the lawmaker if they'd like to lead the invocation. That's perfectly acceptable and a part of our long-standing tradition. We will lose these freedoms unless you and I, dear listener, are the ones that are standing up and saying, no, this is not right. This is not freedom. We're opposed to this. We're going to maintain what our history, what our tradition stands for, and certainly what the First Amendment does.
Excellent. When we come back, let's talk about what happens in your place of work, because this is, of course, the most recent letter, which we talked about briefly last week, but I want to get into it a little bit more because it also relates to even some of the things we've talked about with Jonathan Saenz about, are we getting to a point where if you're an Orthodox Christian, there are just certain professions you just have to avoid? We'll be right back.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of view can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Privileged to have in studio with us today Kelly Shackelford and Jeremy Dys. And, of course, they're with First Liberty. And if you are receiving their emails or even their letters, which I certainly do because I've supported it over the years, well, thing that you have been talking about, Kelly, is what happens when these religious liberty issues come into the workforce. And we've talked about this a little bit, even with Jeremy Dys, this idea that, with Jonathan Saenz, with the Texas Professional Protection Act, because even in the state of Texas, but certainly nationwide, you've had all these different cases where if you spend 8 hours a day, and for you lawyers, 10 hours, 15, 16, 18 hours, whatever, that's your life. And then if you lose your religious liberty in the workforce, well, then all you have is your religious liberty in the church or at home. And that's a big issue, which is why you find so many of those cases are actually surfacing there now, aren't you?
Well, yeah, it's important. I mean, look, if the government controls your paycheck, then they control your life. And so if they can now tell you whether you're a Christian employer or a Christian employee, if it's now that, well, I'm sorry, you don't have religious freedom in running your business or you don't have religious freedom at your workplace, then and you're done. I mean, you really don't have religious freedom.
Right.
The good news is the list you're looking at, you can see check, 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 check.
Yes.
Those are all wins.
Right.
We have won every one of these cases that have come to final conclusion so far. But this is a battle we're in the middle of. That's what people need to understand. Now, I've been doing this 30 years. This didn't used to be the battle, okay? This is the battle now. This is a really important battle, but we're in the midst of it, and we've got to make sure we win it. And cases like the Kleins, Sweet Cakes by Melissa, are really important for that because I think most people know they're the Oregon bakers who were fined $135,000. Their business was bankrupted, and they were actually ordered by the judge not to speak publicly their beliefs about marriage because they didn't have the same belief that the government did about same-sex marriage. And this was all because they wouldn't do a custom gay wedding cake. Look, it's not like there's a problem with people getting wedding cakes, okay? But what they're doing is trying to find people that have different religious beliefs and then see if the government can put the screws to them. And we're a plenty of big country for people to have different beliefs and live at peace with one another.
Very true.
This is trying to create an issue that doesn't exist. And what it does is it gives the government the power to tell you, no, you can't run your businesses in accordance with your faith. The way things should work in this country is people should run their business in accordance with their faith. If you don't like what they believe, don't go there. This is what freedom looks like. But if instead the government is now making a one-size-fits-all and telling everybody, no, if your religious beliefs disagree with our really religious beliefs of the government, then we can shut your business down. Well, then nobody can run their business according to their faith. And you've given the government a power that is unbelievably powerful and destructive. And so I think we're going to win this. I think we're going to win it at the Supreme Court. Again, will they take the Klein case?
We should pray right now.
Pray right now.
Yeah.
I ask people, be praying right now because they are voting today. We will probably find out Monday. They might announce on Monday they're kicking it to the next conference, which they have now done 4 times on this case. So they're clearly looking at something. But whether they take this case, the Sweet Cakes case, or not, they are going to deal with this issue. And I really do believe, based upon who we have on the Supreme Court right now, that they're going to rule the right way. I think it would be 5-4, but I think they would. But we really need to be in prayer. We really need to be in this battle because this is really important to people's freedoms.
Jeremy, I've written about this years ago, about this. If we don't win these battles, then, could you be a Christian photographer? Could you be a Christian baker, a Christian florist? Could you work in the hospitality arena? Because I use an example from the wildflower in Vermont where they were fined $30,000. Or could you actually be a counselor because some have been kicked out of the counseling program because of their view about homosexuality? Could you be a teacher? One that was kicked out of the doctoral program there. So people may be familiar with Aaron and Melissa Klein or some of the other individuals, but it goes a lot broader than that to just those individuals, but the future of Christians being able to exercise their belief and their faith in their area of business or even in the field of education.
Yeah, you can't even sell chicken at the San Antonio airport. I mean, it's gotten so ridiculous that even fried chicken is designated by city councilmen as a symbol of hate, as if it is, something that is burning on someone's lawn. And my goodness, that is the furthest thing from the reality on things. And worse, then they justify, of course, we're talking about Chick-fil-A down at the San Antonio airport. Sure. We sent a letter down to the Department of Transportation saying they should do an investigation on this. Why? Well, they received a $3.5 million loan, grant from the federal government to be able to do this renovation project down there at San Antonio. And they gave assurances in that grant that they would not discriminate on the basis of creed, which is religion. And here they are openly admitting that they're discriminating on the basis of religion. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when they're called on it, what's the mayor's response? Oh, we're not discriminating on the basis of religion. No. We just we recognize that 15% of our business comes through on a Sunday, and they're not open on Sunday, so we need to find someone who is. Now, folks, just think through this for 1 second here. If you were in an airport and you happen upon Chick-fil-A on a Sunday, I know you're disappointed, like I am too. But do you just go, well, I guess I'm going to starve today?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing else I can eat except for Chick-fil-A today. I guess 15% of that revenue is just out the door. No, of course there's other restaurants you're going to go to and find something to eat with, and you're going to be fine. But even that admission by the mayor says a lot, because why is Chick-fil-A closed on a Sunday? They're there to accommodate their employees so that they have the opportunity to worship on their Sabbath. That's why Chick-fil-A chooses to close that day. And so what the mayor is actually saying to you is that because Chick-fil-A chooses to honor and respect and then accommodate the religious beliefs of their employees, they must be punished for it. They are nothing more than a symbol of hate, and they have no business doing business on the property of San Antonio City property. The sad thing about that entire situation, and what makes this sadly ironic, is that the only people who are actually violating the non-discrimination ordinance of San Antonio are the San Antonio City Council members.
That's right. Yeah.
Chick-fil-A agreed to abide by it. There's no evidence that they had in any situation violated a non-discrimination ordinance around the country, and the staff even told the City Council that. And yet still, they must be punished. And this is not going to just end at Chick-fil-A. You're seeing this right now at Yale University, where Yale Law School is telling people that they're not going to fund or give loan forgiveness to those students that choose to work for Christian organizations. They're otherwise qualified for those, and even though Yale University receives over $400 million in federal grants and contracts every year and has a $29 billion, that's with a B, dollar endowment, they're still not going to, they're just simply going to discriminate against the religious beliefs of various organizations that choose to run their business that way. This is absolutely outside the bounds of what the Founding Fathers ever thought could happen here, and it should stop.
Let me just mention again, for those you watching online, we did post these a while back. This is the letter that went to Elaine Chao, who is the Secretary of Transportation, and also the press release, and that is available. All you have to do is do a search or find it from last Friday, and you'll find it there. And so, again, of course, you can go to First Liberty, and if you can figure out how they got the new website here, I'm trying to give everybody a good direction on where to find that, but go to cases. Most of the time you'll find all of that, but this is one of those pending ones that's real easy to find. And we'll spend some more time talking with Jonathan Saenz about that. But, Kelly, the other thought that crossed my mind is maybe when we come back from the break, just the whole area of the military. If you look right now at your website, it shows you and Jeremy and Michael walking down there, although I found out you were outside the whole time, but nevertheless, which I did not know. But nevertheless, Michael's not here. When we come back, a lot of these cases have to do with the military, and I know we have a lot of listeners that are in the military, and they're just kind of horrified by what is happening there, because if there's ever been a coercive environment, it's by the definition, the military. I mean, you are told when to get up and when to go to bed, and you are to salute at certain times. And as a result, it is something where they oftentimes feel like your First Amendment rights just fly out the window. And it's good to recognize that you've had some really successful cases. Let me mention a few. Philip Monka, for example, Air Force Sergeant, relieved of duty for declining to agree with the particular view on marriage. Or Wes Motter, of course, we've talked about him many times before, Navy chaplain, threatened with dishonorable discharge for counseling according to the Bible. But you've got a couple of others, an Air Force chaplain, and another, matter of fact, two in the Air Force that I want to talk about when we come back from the break, because they also are protected. And so whether you're a teacher, whether you're in the military, or whether you're just trying to bake a cake or take a picture or maybe run an inn or something like that, you do have First Amendment rights. And that's why we always like to feature First Liberty on our Friday weekend edition program. So let's take a break and come back and talk about some of those. Even though Michael Berry's not here, I think you two can cover for him pretty well. So we'll take a break and come back with more right after this.
Socialism might sound cool to some people right now, but traditionally, Americans have been hostile to it. Historians attribute between 85 and 100 million deaths to 20th century communist regimes. Karl Marx's and Friedrich Engels' socialism, which they described in their Communist Manifesto, resulted in the destruction of livelihoods, forced famine, and political executions. Of this devastation, philosopher and free market advocate Jay Richards writes, "Never has an idea had such catastrophic consequences." Dr. Richards recommends we rely on Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of socialism, a way of organizing a society in which major industries are owned and controlled by the government rather than by individual people and companies. No candidate is specifically advocating that, but politicians are proposing Medicare for all, free college, and a Green New Deal that encompasses several socialist measures. Paying for all this would require ominous tax increases and destroy entrepreneurship and free enterprise. Still, most candidates won't call their proposal socialist. They insist they are recommending needed programs. Is this simply expanding the welfare state, or is it socialism? Washington Post economics columnist Robert Samuelson explains that modern socialism, as opposed to the traditional strain, is mostly about the welfare state. But, he writes, the ultimate goal is similar. It is to control as much of the economy as possible, to advance the agendas of economic and social justice, to edge toward the socialist ideal, from each according to his ability to each according to his need. Mr. Samuelson believes that Americans' broad support for programs such as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and unemployment insurance signals that we are socialists. He says both parties are addicted to this socialism. Most candidates won't admit their ideas for drastically expanding government are socialist. As Robert Samuelson concludes, this does not mean we can escape the consequences of moving in this direction. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Point of View, Truth Team 360.
If I hear it from somewhere else, I don't consider it credible until I hear it from Point of View. There are so few people fighting on the front lines for our freedoms. I think Point of View certainly is one of those. And without ministries like Point of View, we really don't have much hope for the future of our children, our grandchildren. They just really help on a daily basis protect the freedoms that we enjoy today. I can't see a better way to invest in our future than to support Point of View.
Point of View is absolutely valuable to the listeners who want to hear the truth. Today, the media, you just cannot trust them, whether it's print or electronic media, and we depend on Point of View to deliver to us the truth. Without Point of View, I do not know where people would turn to get the message that they need to hear about truth in our culture today. Please consider supporting Point of View.
Point of View, Truth Team 360.
You can join with the team just by going to the website, pointofview.net, and I hope that you will, because if nothing else, you're probably hearing some things you've never heard before. Kelly, for just a minute, let's talk about the military, and of course, Jeremy, I'll get your comments as well, because it does seem to me that that's one of those places where you felt the need to develop a whole division just to address the issue of the military. And we've talked about Mickey Weinstein, but there are some other issues besides just him that have affected some of these people in the military.
Yeah, it's actually, I wish I could give credit that we were just brilliant, that we came up with this great idea. What happened is we hired this, we needed a sort of, an attorney with a number of years of experience to come on our staff, not fresh out of school or whatever, but somebody who had, 7 or 8 years of litigation and all that. And we hired this guy who was leaving the military, was a Marine, and had done legal work in the military. He
was a JAG, wasn't he? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so we hired this guy, but it was just to do regular legal work. And then, I don't know, 6 months later, these things started happening in the military with religious freedom, and everybody was out there going, does anybody know anybody that has any military law experience? And it's like we turned and we looked, and there in the office next to us was Mike Berry, who, by the way, had argued more cases before the highest military court than any other attorney in the system.
Wow.
So it was God. I mean, God knew, that we needed Mike on staff, and so we put Mike in charge. And because of the flurry of these cases against chaplains, against different individuals in the military, and as you described earlier, Kerby, in the military, these people can't really always speak for themselves.
That's right.
And so if somebody is not able to come in, they'll all lose their freedom. They did not give up their religious freedom when they joined the military. They have a right to still live out their faith. I mean, we have chaplains in the military for a reason. It's because they can't leave and go to a church, right?
Right.
You have to have religion somewhat accommodated to them. And in fact, we've had so many cases now. We've had generals and just all the leaders in the military say, without faith, we wouldn't have a military. Most people join because of their faith. It's the main thing most people rely upon in their service. So you take away this, you will destroy our military. And so it's very important that we win these cases. And we've had, again, it's one thing to have the cases we've had with Philip Monk and others. Oscar Rodriguez, the case we have right now, is just outrageous. The idea that you would have uniformed military people grab someone because they're going to mention God in a ceremony, a private retirement ceremony, is beyond the pale. If anybody who hasn't heard that, I think most people have heard that story.
And watch the video.
Yeah, put in Oscar Rodriguez and do a Google search, Oscar Rodriguez in video or YouTube or whatever, and watch the video of what happened. We just argued that case. We just argued a hearing at the Federal District Court in Washington, D.C. just a week or so ago. But that was one thing. But then to have to defend all these chaplains we've been having to defend.
Amazing.
Chaplains are supposed to be religious. That's their job, and then for them to get attacked because they're following their faith and their endorsing group, their denomination, which is what they're required to do. We've won every one of these cases. The only one we have not won in the military was a really bad case.
Marine? Yeah,
it was a Marine who actually was ordered to remove a scripture verse from her workstation. It said, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." And we should have won that case. We were right on the law. We just had a really bad court. The highest military court they're not used to dealing with religious freedom, and so they just totally mucked up their decision. It's just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's certain things it's well, that's my opinion. No, this was just wrong. They looked under the statute, and they totally violated what the statute said. And if the Supreme Court would have taken it, I know we would have won, but they didn't take it. So that was the only case. Every other case we've had, and it's a lot, we've won every single one of them. And I really do believe we're turning the ship around. The Mikey Weinsteins and their threats that used to cause all these different military leaders to run, kind of scared, shutting down religious freedom, taking the Bible off the VA stand, whatever. They used to do that when he yelled. Now they really ignore Mikey Weinstein. Why?
Yeah.
Because Mike Berry comes in and says, no. Here's what the military regulations say. Here's what the DOD regulations say. Here's what Air Force policy says. You obviously have somebody who knows the law. And that plus the Constitution, there is tremendous. This goes all the way back to George Washington.
Yes, that's why he had chaplains.
Gave every soldier a Bible and provided chaplains from the very beginning. So this is something steeped in our history and tradition, and it's also very constitutional.
Just since we're almost coming to a break, you've got 2 Air Force situations right now, right? Those are the ones we should be praying for?
Absolutely. Be praying for, especially this Oscar Rodriguez case. We just argued what they're trying to do now is this was so horrible what they did that they're hoping it never gets to court. So they're asking the judge to throw it out on all kinds of technicalities that it can't be heard by a court is what they're essentially arguing. And just pray that the judge doesn't fall for that, because all Oscar has asked for in this case is that they admit that what they did was wrong and that it won't happen again. That's it. And they were asking open court, will you agree that you won't do this again? And they said, we can't say that here in court. So, I mean, this would be a great precedent for everybody in the military if this judge has the courage to not sort of say, hey, I can skip this case by saying I have no jurisdiction to hear it. when he does have jurisdiction to hear it. This is something that has to be stopped.
One of the things I've noticed about some of your cases is when they get the letter, it's a demand letter, something like that, they go, oh, I'm sorry. But sometimes you instead have them double down, and whether it's the Kuntz cheerleaders or whether it's the Oscar Rodriguez case, Jeremy, it's maybe just too hard for some people to say, whoops, I was wrong in the law, I made a mistake.
Yeah, the two hardest words in the English language for a lot of people, including governmental leaders, is "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
That's a very difficult pill to swallow because it has to admit that they've done something wrong, and they feel like even if this doesn't happen, they feel like they're going to be conceding something, some form of guilt that has to be pronounced upon them, even if that's an electoral loss. Which is probably going to be a rare thing, but maybe they feel like they're going to actually be, admitting guilt in a court of law or something like that. That doesn't happen either. But the reality is it's very difficult for people to say, I'm sorry. And sadly, that needs to happen more often than it does. But we try to hold their feet to the fire. And you imagine how much litigation would be resolved if people would just turn around and say, I'm sorry,
this
I was
Oscar
wrong.
Rodriguez thing, when you see the video, you just go, somebody has to be accountable for this.
But think about this. You had uniformed military grab a United States citizen without, that's a violation of the Fourth Amendment, okay?
Yeah.
You can't grab a United States citizen without just cause, without, an affidavit and warrants and all this. And you certainly can't ban their speech because they're going to mention God. That's First Amendment violation. So they violated all kinds of constitutional provisions.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we have a lot more to cover, and it will take place right after these important messages.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed, every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands, and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you've been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is our weekend edition, and certainly we have a lot to cover today. In studio with us, Kelly Shackelford, Jeremy Dys, of course, with First Liberty. They've been with us many times before. Jonathan Saenz will be joining us a little bit later. He's president of Texas Values. We talk about Chick-fil-A. And a little bit later in the program, we probably will talk a little bit about some of the things that the Attorney General William Barr had to say this week in terms of whether spying on a political campaign is a big deal. He thought that it was. But since we'll be getting into some other issues in just a few minutes, Kelly, let me start with one of the articles we've posted. And again, anybody watching online sees a picture right now of me holding up Linus telling the Christmas story. Well, it turns out, as we talked about last week, these two individuals, and this goes back to the Christmas season, Joan Wilson and Wilma Wells, were actually stopped from telling the kids, first of all, what Christmas is all about, and second of all, completely prevented from finishing the story of the Charlie Brown Christmas. So, first of all, these two criminals, and I'm doing air quotes, of course, found themselves in the first time being told what they could or could not say in their own home. But again, you've got a really good story and completion to the story that we talked about last week. What happened?
Yeah. Well, again, these are women who are reading to children in their home. This is a government facility, but this is where they live.
Yes.
And they're talking about Christmas. So a natural question is, do you guys even understand, why people celebrate Christmas? What's it about? Basic education. And the government officials said, oh, no, we're not going there. Okay, so let's attack the elderly women for asking a question about Christmas to try to help the kids. Then as they start to read the Charlie Brown Christmas story, they stop the Christmas story because, of course, you get to a point where Linus is going to mention Scripture and whisk the kids out of the room like they're, going to be, involved in some sort of criminal activity. And again, this is all, they were ordered and huffed and sort of, angry at them. These are government officials again, all because of them wanting to, read the Charlie Brown Christmas story. It's outrageous. This is their home. They don't have the government has no right to discriminate against people in their own home because they're going to mention religion. The good news is they have now apologized to these women. But I do encourage people, if you, when you get a chance, go to the website, and
story right down beneath your picture there. You can go all the way down. You'll find it. And then look for Linus, Charlie Brown. You'll find it.
Yeah,
that's all I need.
And then you'll see lots of links underneath and stuff. You can go to the one at First Liberty. You can see a picture of these women. You'll realize that this is the modern day Bonnie and Clyde. I mean, these are real criminals. It makes you so mad when you see their picture that this was done to them. But I think it's a great thing for everybody to do and to share, because this is a real problem we're seeing at First Liberty. We have cases involving people who live in senior living facilities across the country that are being attacked because of their faith. They're being told, oh, yeah, we know there's a piano in the common area room. But, I mean, one of them is a big sign they put up. It said, any and all Christian music is banned, ! Right? We've had ministers being told they can't have a Bible study in their own apartment. And this is really bad. That's bad alone, right? Just on that. But these are places a lot of times where people can't leave. It's either maybe they have dementia or Alzheimer's, or maybe they just have physical issues. And the only way they're going to be able to have a religious service or to be able to get something on the Bible or whatever is in their own building. And then for them to be banned for the rest of their lives from ever being a part of any sort of religious activity, it's wrong. It violates the law, number one, but it's just morally repugnant. And we have got to stop this, and it's happening everywhere. And so I encourage people to grab this and share it so that other people know this is against the law, so that we can stop this. And everybody listening to this knows somebody in one of these homes.
That's right.
Okay? This could happen to somebody you know, and if not, it's going to happen to you if we don't make sure we put an end to this.
The article we've posted actually is from the Christian Post, which I highly recommend. Kelly suggested this one as well because there's about 20 different endnotes there to give you some documentation. But if you go to firstliberty.org, on the upper right-hand corner, click on that button that says Cases, and then you can see the picture of these two criminals. I'm only being facetious. These are two of the nicest looking ladies, and yet, again, next to it is a green check mark that says win. And Jeremy, that's just a good example of the fact that this might just be one story. We have listeners in Michigan that probably are not too far away from where this took place, but the bigger issue is this seems to be happening all the time in some of these senior centers, doesn't it?
Well, it does. We, as Kelly alluded to, we've got a case down in Florida where we've got a similar situation going on. We've got another one in the state of Virginia where that's happening. We've heard of an issue in Colorado and looked into that. And so these are taking place all over the country. And the travesty that's involved here, as Kelly kind of mentioned here, is just think about if this was your house.
Yes.
Because that's what this is. In the eyes of the law, that community is their home. They live in an apartment that is, kind of one room of their home, but the community areas are every bit their living room or their family room or their TV room, their media room, whatever you want to call it. That's a part of their home. And so they're entitled to not only be there, but they're entitled to use it for their purposes, that every lawful purpose that is out there, which includes religious purposes. And so when the management, which may be a private organization, comes in and says you can't use it for religious purposes, they're actually violating federal law in the Constitution. It's as if someone were to come into your house that stands by itself in its own neighborhood. They were to come in and you say, oh, I'm sorry, you can't use this living room to have your church Bible study in on Sunday night. That's the same thing. If you sit down at your dinner table and read Charlie Brown Christmas to your kids, and you get to the part about Linus and a state censor comes and says, oh, no, we're not going to go there. No, that type of paternalism is repugnant under the law. And yet this is what is happening. My wife plays the piano beautifully, and I can't imagine if she sat down at the piano, which we sometimes do as a family, to play some hymns or some songs that we want our kids to learn, especially at Christmas time, some carols that they want to be singing. And the censor came in and slammed the lid down on the piano, and on my wife's fingers says, no, you can't play that. Or put a note on the music stand that says any and all Christian music is banned. That's what is happening when you go into these places. It's as if they came into your home and put that black and white note on your music stand saying no Christian music on this piano. They have no right to be able to do that. And when they do, if they did it in our house, we would rightly kick them out of the home. Why would we put up with it if it's in an apartment complex or in a senior living center of some sort? That is repugnant under the law, and we need to view it as such.
Yes. Well, again, we're going to take a break, but again, if you would like to know a little bit more, this is something I would hope that you take this article. Mm-hmm. For those of you watching online, I'm holding up Linus right now, giving us, again, Luke 2, verses 8 to 14.
Part of the criminal conspiracy, along with Wilma and Joan.
Yeah, so there you are. So we have that, and of course, then we also have the picture of them. You can go to First Liberty. We have a link both under Kelly's bio as well as Jeremy's. When we come back, we're going to add one more lawyer to this mix, individuals you guys known for many years, because Jonathan used to be part of, at that time it was called Liberty Institute, now called First Liberty, but of course he's the president of Texas Values. And we're going to look at this Chick-fil-A case that started in Texas, but has become kind of a national story, and these two organizations have been involved, and so we're going to talk about that and what you can do in your local community right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Dennis Prager has a phrase that he's been using for some time. He says the left ruins everything. That is the title of a recent PragerU video by him. It surfaced in a recent commentary by him with the title, How the Left Keeps Me Religious. I really questioned his phrase the first few times I heard him say it. Perhaps it was the realization that every generalization has exceptions. But Dennis Prager is a thoughtful person, so I didn't reject the idea immediately. It is important to understand that Prager makes a distinction between liberalism and the left. Liberals and conservatives value truth. The left does not. And in his recent commentary, he acknowledges that liberals have done some good, but he then adds, everything the left has touched, it has ruined. The most obvious example, he says, is the university. Harvard professor Steven Pinker, a liberal and an atheist, says the left has rendered the university a laughingstock. If you've been reading my commentaries for any length of time, you've heard me cite many examples, and Dennis Prager accuses the university of teaching gullible young students lies, immoral ideas, and foolish doctrines, and then goes on for 6 paragraphs with awful examples of what is taught on campus today. One example from his video that is briefly mentioned in his commentary is what the left has done to the arts. The God-centered West produced Bach and Michelangelo. By contrast, the left has produced mostly junk. He says there's nothing higher to aspire to because the focus is often merely to shock, not to inspire. In fact, there's a large amount of so-called art that is nothing more than scatological art. The Bible and a belief in God were important in the formation of Western culture and in the creation of America. Rejection of those ideas has given us a leftist perspective that seems to be trying to ruin everything. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From 20th Century Fox and Franklin Entertainment, Breakthrough, starring Chrissy Metz, based on a true story. Breakthrough, rated PG, in theaters Wednesday, April 17th. Point of View, Truth Team 360.
Hello, Point of View listener. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Point of View Radio is so important to the Christian community in our country. Kerby Anderson and the team there deserve your financial support during this time. They don't ask a lot, but when they do ask, they need your financial support to make the ministry whole, to keep promoting the gospel and the truth about what's going on in our country. We consider them kindred spirits and partner in ministry at Point of View with us here at American Family Radio. So if you would, write them a check, give them a donation with your credit card, whatever you can do to help them keep the cause of Christ before the public on their radio program, Point of View.
Point of View, Truth Team 360.
Last week was our Truth Team week, and Tim Wildman just reminding you that we are dependent upon your financial gifts, and if you have not had a chance to send in your pledge, we would appreciate that. Just simply go to the website, pointofview.net, and click on that button that says Join the Team Now. As you go there, you'll also find out a little bit more about Kelly Shackelford and Jeremy Dys, but also we are adding one more to the mix, individual you guys know only so well, Jonathan Saenz. Kelly, of course, I guess you hired him, is now the president of Texas Values, but at one time was the director of legislative affairs and attorney for what at that time was called Liberty Institute. So, Jonathan, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's great to be on.
I might just mention, first of all, that last week we talked about this letter that was actually crafted by First Liberty that went to the individual who is responsible for that, and that is the Department of Transportation, Elaine Chao. And so we've been kind of following this first from First Liberty, but Jonathan, we've also been following that from you as well. Here's something from Texas Values about Chick-fil-A. But this started out as a story in San Antonio. We just sort of covered it as a local Texas story, but it's pretty much become a national story, hasn't it?
Well, it's gotten a lot of attention, and rightly so. Anytime you have the government, particularly a government in Texas, taking this type of unlawful rogue action to punish a business, a Christian business, punish someone because of their specific religious beliefs, it almost reminds you of when the city of Houston tried to subpoena sermons. I mean, it is such an overreach by the government and very concerning. And that's why I was excited to see my friends and my mentor, Kelly Shackelford, and the team at First Liberty jump right in, send a letter over. We sent out a press release. I saw Senator Ted Cruz messaged on it. So did State Senator Donna Campbell. A lot of people are outraged. But then the question is, well, what do you do next, right? So there's an investigation at the Department of Transportation that's been requested. Attorney General Paxton is looking into this matter. But we're right in the middle of the legislative session. It just so happened that we have a couple of pieces of religious freedom legislation that would relate to this issue and would allow us to help stop these type of actions of what the city of San Antonio is doing to Chick-fil-A. And then on top of that, it so happens there's a hearing on this Wednesday, April 17th, for these two bills, House Bill 1035 and House Bill 3172. So we're calling this the Save Chick-fil-A Day. So you got a chance to take some action at the Texas Capitol or go on social media, hashtag Save Chick-fil-A, and make a positive, very important statement for religious freedom.
Well, Jonathan, first I guess I would say to all the listeners, because I bet everybody's heard about this, I would encourage them, if they're in Texas, go to texasvalues.org and get involved, because they can actually make a difference in this legislation and what's happening. If you're outside of Texas, I would tell you to go to firstliberty.org, get a copy of the Chick-fil-A story, share this around. People need to know that this is a violation of the law. You can even look at our letter that we sent to the Department of Transportation, because they're receiving millions of dollars of taxpayer funds. It is illegal to use millions of dollars of taxpayer funds when you're engaged in religious discrimination. But, Jonathan, I wanted to ask you two things. First, I saw something that maybe the San Antonio City Council is going to bring this back up for another vote. Do you know anything about that? And then secondly, can you tell us what this legislation is that is going to be discussed where people can support it next Wednesday?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was in San Antonio yesterday, as timing would have it, right? You know, you see these things and you're like, wow, the Lord had all of this figured out before I did, and thank God for that. But so I was in San Antonio speaking to a group, a women's group, and so there were some folks there locally, and so there is an effort, and we're hearing there could be something happening on April 18th, Thursday, the day right after our Save Chick-fil-A Day, but we're not sure what's going to happen yet. There's an effort to try to see if there's enough votes to see if they can reconsider this and have it on the agenda for 2 or 3 weeks later. And so this issue is red hot in the city of San Antonio. So I really encourage people to stay engaged, and we'll share information on that about what the city of San Antonio council, because they're getting a lot of pressure, and what they might do. And so that's going to be unfolding in the next couple of weeks. And then on the legislation, House Bill 1035 is a bill by Bill Zedler. It's called the Free to Believe Act. And then House Bill 3172 is the First Amendment Defense Act by State Representative Matt Krause. And one of the bills is a little bit shorter than the other. Matt Krause's bill primarily deals with the government taking action against people on their religious beliefs related to marriage. So it's got a little bit more of a pointed focus that relates and is impacted or can be impacted by this issue, or allows to do something on the Chick-fil-A issue, as well as the Free to Believe Act, House Bill 1035. But that bill really encompasses a whole lot of other folks that could have punishment against them based on their religious beliefs on marriage and issues of sexuality. And so great opportunities for us to do something in the House State Affairs Committee on Wednesday, April 17th. So we're inviting people to come to the Capitol. We need people to testify, to sign in favor of these bills. We need a strong public showing. As you know, Kelly, government belongs to those who show up. So we're asking people to come to the Capitol. We'll be here all day. Our office is close by. Other members' offices will be available. Anything we can do to accommodate people, and we've got action items on this at txvaluesaction.org.
Jeremy, let me come to you for just a minute, because one of the arguments was, well, Chick-fil-A is anti-LGBT, which I think is kind of ludicrous because they actually serve lots and lots of people. But they also added something in San Antonio. Now it's also shown up in Buffalo, New York. and that is Chick-fil-A Foundation donated to, are you ready for this? Salvation Army, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and a Christian home for troubled youth. And so that's justification for discrimination,
those
right?
Nefarious organizations like the Salvation Army and those bigoted groups like the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, my gracious, how can we dare to stand to have those people in the public square? But this is the type of blacklisting that's going on. And the thing that I think Jonathan might be able to shed some light on, too, because I think the legislation he's working on is going to help stem some of this bleeding right now. But the only people who have violated San Antonio's non-discrimination ordinance are the city council members themselves. Chick-fil-A agreed to be bound by that non-discrimination ordinance. And at the hearing, and most importantly, at the public hearing that was that this vote took place in, I watched it. The staff members actually said, well, look, there's no evidence that Chick-fil-A has ever violated our non-discrimination ordinance or any other non-discrimination ordinance that we're aware of here. They serve chicken, and they serve it to anybody just as long as they don't show up on Sundays. So, Jonathan, I'm wondering if you've got any more details about how the legislation you're talking about might help bring some light to that.
Well, absolutely, and that's what we've seen for many years. And I was in San Antonio many years ago when they passed an ordinance based on sexual orientation and gender identity to give the government really a leg up and really make choose winners and losers on people's views politically and also privately and personally. And so that's where a lot of times these things come from. The government thinks, oh, well, because we have these ordinances now in place, we can now say that someone's religious beliefs are in conflict with that and that they're going to be the ones that lose. And so, it's very clear, though, if you have something in state law that makes it clear where the lines are drawn, what the limitations are of the government on these type of things, and particularly as they relate to when you contract with the government, what the government can and cannot do on those type of issues to have a level playing field. And both of the bills, House Bill 1035 and House Bill 3172, are part of addressing those issues. And so, but there are a whole lot of other issues we see around the country that are of concern when it relates to the government trying to punish people because of their religious beliefs on marriage that these bills could help with as well. It just so happens that this issue related to Chick-fil-A is happening right now, and people are seeing a real example of what happens when the government goes too far.
Jonathan, what if people can't? I mean, it'd be great for people to attend if they're in Texas. If people can't attend, number one, what is the best thing that they can do? And again, for people outside of Texas, you need to share this information as to what's going on. It's probably going to come to your community next, and you need to be ready, equipping other people in your community to know that this battle is coming. And again, you can find that at firstliberty.org. But if you're in Texas, I'd encourage you to connect to Texas Values and do what you can to support these bills that are going to be voted on.
Let me take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about that because we're going to keep Jonathan here for a little bit longer.
Okay, good.
And one of the issues that you were talking about, Jeremy, is good because the other day Chick-fil-A said, we serve 140,000 people on a daily basis without regard to race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or gender identity. We have a code of conduct. Do unto others as you have them do unto you.
Ooh, there's their problem right there.
There's their problem. We're going to take a break. We have a lot more to cover. We will do so right after these important messages.
It's amazing but true. When it comes to one of America's biggest household expenditures, healthcare, a lot of people think they've got no choice. People are used to thinking we have to do it this way, but they don't. Yes, you have the freedom to choose an alternative with your health care. It's MediShare, and it costs way less than the alternatives. The typical family saves $500 a month, not a year, a month. And if you're single, this can save you a lot too. And let's face it, a big reason MediShare is 400,000 people strong, it just works. They've shared over $3 billion in medical bills, so they can help share your needs too. Joining MediShare for so many people is one of those things that makes you say, why didn't I do this before? So yes, the time has come for something better. Look into joining MediShare and see why so many people are opting out of the old way and into the new. Why not look into this? Just call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition, and Kelly Shackelford, Jeremy Dys here, and we'll keep Jonathan over for just another minute or two. Jonathan Saenz, who is with, again, Texas Values. And first of all, for those of you in the state of Texas, you can go to txvalues.org or just click on where Jonathan's picture is. It will take you there. But I thought we'd also, Jonathan, talk about what people outside of the state of Texas can do. We broadcast in 42 different states. So people in Texas say, okay, I'm really interested in this. But people even in Alaska or in Georgia or North Carolina, California, Illinois, whatever, are, especially some of our listeners right now in Buffalo, New York, you know, that's another place where this is surfaced, are saying, well, is there something we can do? And you've been talking about some of this legislation that could, Jonathan, be model legislation that could be used in other Texas legislatures, don't you think?
That's right. The two bills are, one's called the Free to Believe Act, House Bill 1035, and the other one is called the First Amendment Defense Act. And so the First Amendment Defense Act is just a little bit shorter, and it's a little bit more specific on when the government tries to punish people based on their religious views on marriage, while the Free to Believe Act takes into context a whole lot of scenarios that are related to religious freedom. And so, but they could be. And it's important because you mentioned, we saw this issue happen in Buffalo against Chick-fil-A. I've seen articles written encouraging other governments across the nation to do the same thing, to ban Chick-fil-A from operating on what can sometimes be government property, like on college campuses. We see the incidents here with airports, and who knows what other settings could be some multi-use facilities that are related to government regulation, or so they think. And but we've seen these growing trends to where people want the government to punish people because of their religious beliefs. And so, but if any place should be doing something about this, it's Texas. And so that's why we're so encouraged about doing something on our Save Chick-fil-A Day on April 17th. So wherever you are, you can help Texas stand strong, help Buffalo, any other areas where this may be about to pop up and we're not aware of it. Make a public statement across the country that not just that you want to protect Chick-fil-A, but the underlying principle here to protect religious freedom from government intrusion.
Well, Jonathan, I appreciate you being with us. And of course, we spend so much time with you talking about Texas issues on our Texas Hour. But I wanted to give you a national platform as well, because others can learn from some of the things that are happening in Texas. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, I appreciate it. And I just want to say, too, thankful so much for our partnership and friendship and our history with First Liberty. But several of our other partners have jumped on this as well by supporting our Save Chick-fil-A Facebook page for April 17th. That's Family Research Council, AFA, Vision America, U.S. Pastor Council. So we appreciate those friends as well, including the partnership and friendship we have here at Point of View.
Well, thank you so very much. Let me, if I can, Jeremy, come to you for just a minute, because David French has been on the program with us, and he has the renewed Chick-fil-A controversy shows the culture war only will get worse. And he uses an idea that you sort of alluded to just a minute ago, because he said, when you look at the so-called offensive organizations supported by Chick-fil-A, he could say that, first of all, they couldn't even be described as culture war organizations like American Family Association or something like that. But he says there is zero difference between giving to Fellowship of Christian Athletes and giving to, say, a youth ministry at your local Baptist church. So I want people to see that this is an issue broader than Chick-fil-A, broader than just the fact that Chick-fil-A gives to something like the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. It gets back to the core issue of First Liberty, doesn't it?
This is you being made to care. If you will not buy lock, stock, and barrel the entire cultural context in which you find yourself in, you will be made to care. Peggy Noonan wrote a great article in the Wall Street Journal several weeks ago talking about the struggle sessions of Maoist China and how people were paraded through the streets, had their hair cut off, and just forced to admit that they were not in lockstep with the Communist Party. This is where we find ourselves at right now. And so if you dare to raise one little bit of a differentiation from that cultural war that is being brought to your doorstep for simply doing what you have done and believed what you have believed in concert with the saints for 2,000 years, you are now pronounced as a pariah on this this environment in which we live. In fact, there is a significant effort underway to redefine the faith once for all delivered to the saints. You're seeing that with presidential candidates right now, saying that their own homosexual life is actually bringing them closer to God. And so if that is the reality here, do not be surprised whatsoever that you're finding yourself in some trouble at your job or as a student somewhere. That's what's coming down the pike here. And the canary that's singing in the coal mine right now with Chick-fil-A is saying, look, we're all about to be asphyxiated in this culture because what was once pronounced as good has now been deemed to be bad. And that is how a cultural revolution begins. You call evil what was good and good what was evil, and you punish any dissenters along the way. That is exactly what's happening with a silly chicken place, but that is emblematic of what's happening more routinely in other places. If we go back down through a list the length of my arm of clients that have had to face this, whether it was Aaron and Melissa Klein we talked about earlier, Eric Walsh, the guy who was a pastor on the weekends and a professional in public health during the weekdays and fired because of sermons he preached. You go on and on down the list of these individuals, even going back so far as the Hobby Lobby situation and the contraceptive mandate. People who we represented a gentleman who's a car dealership who closed his business on Sundays.
Yes.
I mean, he did extremely well because of all that, but he was objecting to the fact that he would have to be compelled by the government to buy things that are in complete disagreement with his worldview. These are all part of the same effort to get you to be silent, to shut you up, to keep you from speaking those important words and allowing anyone else to actually pursue truth.
I want to make sure people understand what happened here, too. Chick-fil-A doesn't do anything that they can put their finger on. The complaint they have is with the owners of Chick-fil-A and who they give money to. Now, if the government can push you out of the marketplace, even though your company has followed every rule, everything, because they don't like you and what religious groups you give money to, personally, think of what that means. I mean, you're next, okay? Who do you give to? Can the government now say, well, then you can't work, or your business doesn't get a license, or, this is not Chick-fil-A even doing anything. This is going after a company and really shutting them out completely because the owners of the country are Christian and give to Christian causes. So if you think that's not coming to you next, you're not paying attention. Everybody who's listening to this, who's a person of faith, this is directly coming at you. And so I pray that Chick-fil-A, instead of just letting this go, will themselves stand up because this is going to keep happening to them. And I know they just want to do their business, but they need to stand here and stop this. It's not only going to happen to them, it's going to happen to a lot of other people and a lot of other businesses who don't have the wherewithal to fight back. And so they really do need to stand up and stop this.
If only so that they can protect the ability to help extremely important organizations like the Salvation Army and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and so many other charities to which they donate that haven't yet been dragged through the mud. That may be the only reason why. Think about what is happening here. They have been pronounced evil because they have given to a group that provides shelter, clothing, and rehabilitation to people who are down on their luck or destitute in other forms of. What will happen with that if Salvation Army goes under? Think about that. Salvation Army loses the ability to function in this world because they were connected to Chick-fil-A and that was bad. Well, then Salvation garbage away. Who has to fill that gap? More government programming has to come into that. And so you're going to be spending significant amounts more money on your taxes in order to help fill that gap. And that's just one. Think of all the other organizations that Chick-fil-A has given to that they're not actually talking about quite yet. They're going after people that are providing remarkable services to people in need, in desperate need of things. And that is absolutely awful. And I find it absolutely despicable that they would try to drain money from a third party here because they disagree with the religious worldview of the people who are giving it.
We're going to take a break, but I might just mention my commentary today is entitled What the Left Ruins, because it's based on Dennis Prager, who's many times said that the left ruins everything. And I always thought that was a little bit extreme until I started looking at his examples. And that is, they're always good at saying what we're against. We're against the Salvation Army. But back to, of course, what Jeremy said. Well, then what are you going to put in his place? We're against, Christian hospitals using Christian principles. Well, then I haven't seen any humanist hospitals built lately or atheist hospitals. Always good at saying what they're against, but never what they're for. And if nothing else, a good example of this can be found in Chick-fil-A. So it's broader than that. As a matter of fact, the second article we've posted here is by an interview that was actually done with David French, who I also quoted just a few minutes ago about that issue. So we come back. We have a lot of other things to put on the table, but I just thought I would educate you on that. And if you think that the Chick-fil-A story is just one that's happening in Buffalo or in San Antonio, no, it could be coming to a community near you. Matter of fact, some of you live in states where the mayors have said, we don't want Chick-fil-A even in our city. Just think about what that means. So we'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
Socialism might sound cool to some people right now, but traditionally, Americans have been hostile to it. Historians attribute between 85 and 100 million deaths to 20th century communist regimes. Karl Marx's and Friedrich Engels' socialism, which they described in their Communist Manifesto, resulted in the destruction of livelihoods, forced famine, and political executions. Of this devastation, philosopher and free market advocate Jay Richards writes, "Never has an idea had such catastrophic consequences." Dr. Richards recommends we rely on Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of socialism, a way of organizing a society in which major industries are owned and controlled by the government rather than by individual people and companies. No candidate is specifically advocating that, but politicians are proposing Medicare for all, free college, and a Green New Deal that encompasses several socialist measures. Paying for all this would require ominous tax increases and destroy entrepreneurship and free enterprise. Still, most candidates won't call their proposal socialist. They insist they are recommending needed programs. Is this simply expanding the welfare state, or is it socialism? Washington Post economics columnist Robert Samuelson explains that modern socialism, as opposed to the traditional strain, is mostly about the welfare state. But, he writes, the ultimate goal is similar. It is to control as much of the economy as possible, to advance the agendas of economic and social justice, to edge toward the socialist ideal, from each according to his ability to each according to his need. Mr. Samuelson believes that Americans' broad support for programs such as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and unemployment insurance signals that we are socialists. He says both parties are addicted to this socialism. Most candidates won't admit their ideas for drastically expanding government are socialist. As Robert Samuelson concludes, this does not mean we can escape the consequences of moving in this direction. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Point of View, Truth Team 360.
And in the absence of resources like Point of View and the silencing of the church, I think it would in effect create the silencing of the church. And that's why, again, it is so essential that that forums like Point of View is so vital to the work of the church. And this is where listeners can be an active participant in spreading the gospel of the kingdom by supporting Point of View.
Without programs like Point of View, ministries and works would not have a forum that reaches the populations that need to hear the truth about the very important issues that America is founded on. So often we take what we hear for granted, the radio program or the wonderful personalities, but you know, they can only be on if people like you and me support them.
Point of View. Truth Team 360.
Back once again, and if you would like to join our conversation today, we've certainly put a lot on the table. 1-800-351-1212, or if you just want to sit back and listen. I run into a lot of people saying, I don't call on Friday. You have such great guests. I just want to hear what they have to say, and I take notes and then go and try to act. But if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Of course, we talked about Chick-fil-A. We talked about religious liberty. But I wanted to ask Kelly Shackelford and Jeremy Dys a little bit more about this issue. We have the Attorney General, William Barr. And the other day, in Senate testimony, it's supposed to be actually just a budget meeting when you get right down to it, but you know what they wanted to talk about, of course, collusion. So this is what the Attorney General said. I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. It's a big deal. Yes, I think spying did occur, but the question is whether it was adequately predicated. But we need to explore that. I think it's my obligation. And he says Congress is usually very concerned about intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies staying within their proper lane. And I want to make sure that that happened. Well, that was considered a bombshell. If you don't think so, here's what Chuck Schumer had to say about it. The Attorney General Barr must retract his statement immediately or produce specific evidence to back it up. Perpetuating conspiracy theories is beneath the office of the Attorney General. And then Nancy Pelosi said, how very dismaying and disappointing that the chief law enforcement officer of our country is going off the rails. He's the Attorney General of the United States of America, not the Attorney General of Donald Trump. Oh, boy. Well, the Attorney General got into news, but I think he was speaking about the fact that there does seem to be a lot of focus on the Trump campaign from the very beginning. Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's just hard to even deal with some of these statements that they're making. They're just silly. Everybody knows that Donald Trump was spied upon. And they don't like the word spy. It was like, okay, he was,
surveilled.
Surveilled. He was surreptitiously taped. He was, I mean, come on. Normal people understand that's somebody's watching you and recording things. Okay, that's spying. And the Attorney General didn't use it in a bad way. He said that it occurred, and he was going to make sure that it was proper. That's what he's supposed to do.
That's what you would hope an Attorney General would do.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous the way these folks react, and I mean, it's just such a credibility booster. If you didn't know anything and you started fresh with those comments from Schumer, from Pelosi, you would immediately say, okay, they just lost their credibility. Because this is silly. He didn't say anything wrong. He did exactly. Hey, I love the choice of this Attorney General. I was in his confirmation hearing.
I remember you were.
And one of the things that caught my attention is I had a theory that because this guy had been Attorney General at age 41 under George Bush, and because he was now kind of coming out of retirement to be Attorney General again at almost 70 years old, I had a feeling that he wouldn't really care what anybody thought, which I thought would be great for the current climate we have, so he can just do his job. And he's been better than I expected even. I mean, this is a guy who really, really cares about the rule of law, about doing things right, about following what the Justice Department should do. He really cares about protecting the integrity even of the Justice Department. So he doesn't, this was verified to me because they have what's called murder boards where they prepare you for like confirmations. And I was talking to people and they were saying, this Barr guy's frustrating because he won't even come to the murder board. Again, he didn't care. He's like, I don't need any of that. I'm just going to be who I am. I'm going to stand on what's right. And so I think he's exactly the Attorney General. Did he show the Mueller report to the president? No, he didn't show it to the president. Did he show it? I mean, he's following the law. He's doing everything like he's supposed to. And the fact that everybody has to try to politicize this, what these people said yesterday was really, it's just silly. He's doing what you want the Attorney General to do. He didn't say there was anything wrong. He said they're looking in to see what happened. It's very, very unusual. I mean, this is really dangerous stuff for the intelligence community to be allowed to surveil a presidential candidate when the other party is in power of that apparatus. We're getting into third world country stuff if there's not real explanations, real evidence to justify that, because now we have whoever's in. So, I mean, what that would mean now for those of you who are on the left is that Donald Trump could have the intelligence community investigating whoever his opponent is.
Oh, sure.
And nobody should want that. I mean, that's a horrible idea. And what happened here was so unusual that it should be looked into. And if it was not backed up, which it seems like there's some problems, there's some people who should really pay for this, because this is the kind of thing that can destroy your country.
And I'm seeing some people that at least are being honest about this. Alan Dershowitz, you know, former Harvard professor, or even former Senator Bob Kerry, was saying this is really dangerous. And of course, we did a booklet years ago on this idea of privacy and surveillance, on how that would affect us. I may have to do an addendum now in light of everything we've learned there. But it's just, again, one of those situations where you've got to appreciate an attorney general that's willing to speak the truth, even in a situation where it's become controversial, to even say some of the obvious things that everybody else is seeing.
Wow, when it becomes controversial to say something that's true, we've really gotten to a spot in our society, haven't we?
That's a scandal in Washington when you tell the truth, right?
That's exactly right. You know, I underscore what Kelly said, though, that it ought to frighten everybody to think about a sitting president investigating a presidential campaign. If you don't hear immediate echoes of Watergate years ago, I mean, you should, right? This is somebody, they didn't break into someone's apartment in the Watergate Hotel, but they may as well have, if that is actually what is to be believed here. And so it's right for us to investigate that. And if you know, I saw the former attorney, or the former head of the FBI, James Comey, saying that, well, I don't know if surveillance of an email is really spying. Oh, you're going to say next that I'm surprised to find that water's wet? I mean, come on. Of course it's spying. That's what they do at the FBI. That's what they're paid to do. So, of course it is. And that kind of dishonesty and intentional deceit is very concerning when it comes to individuals and an organization that we've put the highest level of trust to go concentrate on the threats to our country and our republic as a whole.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, though, one of the articles I wanted to focus on, we posted, Jarrett Stepman, the intellectual dishonesty of the campaign against the Electoral College. And I did a commentary earlier this week in which I just said sometimes the answer to a lot of the questions that are being raised right now is it's a republic, not a democracy. Right. And so whether you talk about the filibuster, and we're going to talk about how the filibuster has been changed around a little bit and how that's good news for various nominees, the whole issue of the Electoral College, which is now being apparently created to benefit slavery, according to the opponents, which is so factually incorrect. I thought we would spend just a little bit of time on that since we got some scholars there. And, of course, we also had a Senate hearing on censorship by the big tech companies, and I'd love to get some thoughts about that. And then we'll conclude with, again, some of these great stories about victories in the area of religious liberty. So we got a lot more to cover. We will do so right after this.
Question, do you have a health insurance plan you are not happy with? Well, Bethany and Jason thought they were stuck. Their plan just kept getting more expensive, and Bethany's favorite doctor didn't even take that plan anymore. And then some friends at church told them about MediShare.
With our previous insurance, we were paying $1,200 a month. With MediShare, we now pay around $600 a month.
Yes, they're paying $600 less per month, and that's a pretty typical savings with MediShare, and they actually like MediShare more.
I was able to go back to my original doctor that I absolutely loved, and it's just been an absolutely beautiful thing being a part of MediShare.
Yeah, so they pay a lot less, and they like it more. No wonder MediShare is growing so fast. Find out more. They're super easy to talk to. All you have to do is call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. One of the articles you will see that we have posted here is the campaign against the Electoral College. Jeremy with me, as well as Kelly. And I might just mention my commentary last Friday. I entitled it, It's a Republic, because it occurred to me that a lot of these issues, whether we're talking about the Electoral College, whether we're talking about regulating campaign speech, whether we're talking about the filibuster, even the idea of the Bill of Rights, a lot of it was that we have a republic where we wanted to protect the rights of the minorities from the majority. And so we're going to turn this into a civics class for just a minute. But, Jeremy, the idea of the Electoral College, a lot of people say it's not fair, but it was a recognition even back then that if we just let population, then the people in Boston and New York, or the people in maybe the big states, would overshadow and dominate the small states. And we found even to this 21st century, if you only went after the population, you just go to Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and you would ignore all the other places where campaigns have had to take place.
Yeah, and I actually saw a meme the other day that had a picture of the United States as a map, and they said if the population for all the cities that would basically constitute that majority under population, if they were concentrated into one dot, it would fill over the dot of the greater Los Angeles area. And that would be the greater rule over the entire country. So you had that one giant dot that's right there, but all the rest of the population that would be ignored because of all that was left undisturbed. Look, our country operates through a democratic system, yes, but it was designed to be a republic. And that's an important distinction that few people care to remember these days, that everybody in this country has the opportunity to have equal say in things, but a democracy does not provide the equality that is required under that system. And so, as the article you posted points out, that the system for electing the Electoral College is itself democratic, at least these days in the 20th century, and even earlier than that is the case. And so we're using democratic principles to ensure equal representation across the entire country, so that, as you say, candidates running for office nationwide are forced to go to Sheboygan as much as they are to Los Angeles. That's very important, that they have to travel down to Man, West Virginia, as much as they've got to go and win votes in Dallas, Texas. You can't ignore those tiny little towns like Upland, Indiana, in favor of, Tallahassee, Florida. You've got to actually go to these places, or at least make your case into those places, so that those votes are received as well.
And Kelly, one of the lines that I borrowed from you, because you have a lot of great lines, is, so you want to get rid of the Electoral College, so you want to get rid of senators too, right?
Yeah.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, first people have to know, what is the Electoral College? You count up the numbers based upon how many senators you have in your state, plus how many House of Representatives members you have in your state. Now, if anybody understands the most basics about the Senate and the House, they understand that your House numbers are based upon your population. So you get, for instance, Texas has, a lot more House members than Rhode Island. Rhode Island, I'm guessing, is one, or, and Texas is like 30-something, right? 35.
Wyoming 1, or some of the others, yeah.
It's based on population. Right. It's pure democratic democracy, where it's, one man, one vote, all that. It's just based upon your population. Yet every state gets 2 senators, no matter how, two of those electoral points for their senators, no matter how much. every state gets 2 senators. So the way you look at our 2 chambers is the House is reelected every 2 years, every cycle. They're directly responsible to the people. It's based on population. The Senate is only every 6 years. It's more responsible not to the people, but really just it was supposed to be originally your state legislature,
right?
But that was changed. But still, the point is there's a difference there. And this is the idea that Jeremy's talking about, that every state gets 2 senators, no matter how small. So when you say, I want to get rid of the Electoral College, I just want a popular vote, then what you're saying is we should get rid of the United States Senate. And what's so bizarre is that many of the people advocating this right now are U.S. senators, like Kamala Harris and Booker and all these people. And you want to just look at them and go, so you shouldn't be a senator. And, I have a feeling they look at you and go, well, what do you mean? Because they don't even understand what they're talking about. And it's a really bad idea for lots of reasons, one of which is you would have New York, L.A., maybe 5 major cities would control the whole country, which is not what anybody wants. And it would, again, change our system to a democracy from a republic. And think of what close elections would result in, okay? Now you have to do recounts everywhere, not in one state, not in one situation. It would be a disaster. And there are a lot of other reasons, but, McConnell, I don't always agree with Senator McConnell, what he says. I think he's done a really good job on judges. But he said something yesterday that I thought was really good. He said, these radical candidates that are running right now for the Democratic Party, and they're asking for getting rid of the Electoral College, packing the court, and he just went through this list. He said, I don't care whether you call yourself a socialist or not. If you are advocating these things, you are advocating for the end of our republic, okay? You are advocating for socialism, and no American should accept that. And he's exactly right. I mean, what these things that they're monkeying with, they don't understand the I don't think most of them, the full of what they're really advocating for. But they are advocating for the overthrow of our system of government. And we would become like every other banana republic. What did the founders refer to a one-man, one-vote, pure democracy as? They said it was a mobocracy. Mm-hmm. They said it was a really bad idea. It was probably the least favored, type of
Very
government
true.
by our founders. And yet these people are running, like crazy people off the cliff because they just want their result. Oh, I'll win. And in the meanwhile, they destroy our entire system of government. And people with that kind of mindset have no business being in any office, much less in the presidency of the United States.
Might just mention that Penedexter's commentary today is, are we socialists? And the answer is no. But again, if you go down that list, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, lowering the voting age to 16, and I see some of you go just rolling your eyes on that one, as well as, like I said, packing the courts and all the rest. Those are ideas that are really structured to change this government and the structure of our government for all times. But one of the other arguments I made is that, and we'll do this after the break, is that because we're a republic, we wanted to protect the rights of the minority. And that's what the filibuster used to be. But when we come back, the filibuster has been so abused that, since we mentioned Mitch McConnell, he's changed that. And that's going to change some things and make your guys' job a lot easier, I suspect, in terms of some of those judges. So I want to talk about that. And one of the things, again, that we always point you to First Liberty is if you would like to see where those judges are and where those votes are, that's on the website. And you showed some of that at the luncheon yesterday. And I had people even at my table going, whoa, you and I sort of take for granted that. But if you want to see that chart, it could change everything. So we'll talk about that right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Dennis Prager has a phrase that he's been using for some time. He says the left ruins everything. That is the title of a recent PragerU video by him. It surfaced in a recent commentary by him with the title, How the Left Keeps Me Religious. I really questioned his phrase the first few times I heard him say it. Perhaps it was the realization that every generalization has exceptions. But Dennis Prager is a thoughtful person, so I didn't reject the idea immediately. It is important to understand that Prager makes a distinction between liberalism and the left. Liberals and conservatives value truth. The left does not. And in his recent commentary, he acknowledges that liberals have done some good, but he then adds everything the left has touched, it has ruined. The most obvious example, he says, is the university. Harvard professor Steven Pinker, a liberal and an atheist, says the left has rendered the university a laughingstock. If you've been reading my commentaries for any length of time, you've heard me cite many examples, and Dennis Prager accuses the university of teaching gullible young students lies, immoral ideas, and foolish doctrines, and then goes on for 6 paragraphs with awful examples of what is taught on campus today. One example from his video that is briefly mentioned in his commentary is what the left has done to the arts. The God-centered West produced Bach and Michelangelo. By contrast, the left has produced mostly junk. He says there's nothing higher to aspire to because the focus is often merely to shock, not to inspire. In fact, there's a large amount of so-called art that is nothing more than scatological art. The Bible and a belief in God were important in the formation of Western culture and in the creation of America. Rejection of those ideas has given us a leftist perspective that seems to be trying to ruin everything. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From 20th Century Fox and Franklin Entertainment, Breakthrough, starring Chrissy Metz, based on a true story. Breakthrough, rated PG, in theaters Wednesday, April 17th.
Point of View, Truth Team 360.
Hey, greetings, everyone. This is Lieutenant Colonel retired Alan West, former member of the 112th Congress. I just want to take a few moments to tell you why it's so important that you support Kerby and what he's doing here with Point of View Ministries and all the great people they have here on this team. This is truly an intersection of the culture. It is truly a place where you can have that open discussion about politics, your faith, and all the things that are affecting our country with the current issues, but it is always from a biblical perspective. And I think that's what makes Point of View Ministries, Point of View Radio, and what Kerby brings in his analysis and his assessment so very important. So please continue to support Point of View Ministries, Point of View Radio. What a great ministry, what a great man, what a great team that you have here at Point of View Ministries and Point of View Radio. Make sure that you support them.
Point of View, Truth Team 360.
Colonel Alan West, who has certainly been not only a guest here, but also a guest host, sat in this chair. And yesterday, we had a chance to hear him at the first Liberty Luncheon. Matter of fact, after Kelly finished Jeremy, I was thinking, okay, who's going to follow that? And then it's Colonel Alan West, and he did not disappoint, did he? It was very good.
That's right.
So it was just great to hear from him as well. Okay, I want to put some things on the table, and one of those is the fact that, indeed, the filibuster, which has, I think, been abused, the 30-hour rule, which has been grossly abused, has been changed. And so if you go to the website, firstliberty.org, the best way is just to scroll all the way to the bottom, and you'll find a button there that says Judicial Nominees. As you go there, you have a chart of the country for the circuit courts and a chart of the district courts. And Kelly, explain that for just a minute, because you show those that have already been moved through the pipeline, but you also give us a look at others coming through the pipeline. And if indeed we move it from 30 hours of testimony and debate to 2 hours, I suspect you're going to be able to fill up some of those courts for the first time.
It's already beginning to happen. What's been happening the last 2 years and 3 months has been really ridiculous. There is a rule that was in place so that if you're a senator and you have a problem with one of the president's nominees to a cabinet or to a judgeship or whatever, you can say, I need 30 hours of debate. That was used 7 times under President Bush in his first 2 years. It was used 8 times under President Obama in his 2 years. It was used 128 times under President Trump. It was just a stalling tactic. The average actual time spent arguing against anybody was an average of 15 minutes. So it was just 30 hours of tie everything up. So the result was that although this president was very unusual in that when he ran for office, he actually said judicial nominations is going to be a priority, and he made promises. He gave a list of Supreme Court choices. He said he was going to defer to outside groups, like the Federal Society and Heritage Foundation and groups like First Liberty that actually focus on proper judicial philosophy. And the politics were going to be out of this, and it was going to be excellent judges who weren't politicians.
Right.
And that's what he's done. These have been, I'm telling you, there's not a comparison. These are the best judges ever who've been nominated. And 85 were confirmed in the first 2 years because of all these stalling tactics. It was still a record in Court of Appeals and all that. So they focused. They did everything they could. They just had this 30-hour debate rule that was being abused. That wasn't the purpose for it. Well, they've just changed that. The Republicans voted and said it's going to be from now on a 2-hour debate rule for all the lower court judges and the lower cabinet level officials positions. We'll keep it 30 hours of Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, and cabinet level. And so what's going to happen now is there's been a backlog of, there's like 50-something district court judges that are just waiting for their vote. And I think that's what should happen. I mean, when we elect the president, we want the president to be able to pick his staff and to put the open positions to fill them. That's part of being the president. And the idea that for 2 years the president couldn't even get his cabinet filled up because of this delaying tactic. And I feel really bad for these people who are willing to serve their country.
That's
I know
right.
a number of them who have had their families on hold for 2 years waiting for a vote. What the Constitution says is advice, and consent of the Senate. That means you either approve or you disapprove. If the president went too far with one of his nominees, disapprove. But you vote on him. You don't just backlog everything and not allow him to have his own staff. So this is now changing, and there are about 150 some odd judicial seats waiting to be filled, and I think they're all going to be filled now. So we're going to have President Trump, who's had a priority on getting these excellent judges onto the courts. We're going to have a record number, in my opinion, now of really excellent judges. This is going to set the courts for the next 30 to 40 years. This is going to be who my grandkids and maybe even their kids come before. And I think it's one of the best things that's happened to our country in a long time. Because, again, it's not, hey, I got you elected. My brother's an attorney. You need to put him on the court. That's not what they're doing. They're saying, this is not about politics. Is this a judge who believes, he sets his own beliefs aside, and he says, what does the statute say? What does the Constitution say? And not a living, breathing document like the liberal side, but I'm going to follow whatever the law says, whether I like it or not. That's what judges are supposed to be like.
One of the articles here is, can Trump flip the circuit courts? And I've heard you say that if this trend continues, it will go to the point where these courts will be made up, I know this is radical, of individuals that look at the text of the Constitution and don't read their own biases into it.
That's right. And look, what does that mean? It means things eventually like Roe v. Wade are over. Okay? If you are pro-abortion, then vote it through. But please don't have 5 justices go into a back room and tell us what the law is when it's not in the Constitution. Same thing with same-sex marriage. It's not in the Constitution. Okay? The founders did not deal with that issue. Therefore, it's left to the people to decide that issue. And, win a democratic discussion. If you want this democracy that they say they want, then win the argument. but don't have judges take everything out of the hands of the people unless they're things that are in the Constitution that really are covered. So I think we're going to see a move, or I think eventually what's going to happen if the courts really begin to do what I think they're going to do, which is go back to the Constitution. What we're going to see is the courts are going to become less important.
I would think so. It's
going to become less politicized because these issues that aren't covered in the Constitution will be up to the people, which is exactly what the founders wanted us to do.
Kind of like what I read in the Federalist Papers, especially Alexander Hamilton and some of the others. One of the other places where there's been abuse is not just in the filibuster, but in the 30-hour rule, but another one, and that is they've been asking religious questions. And one of the other articles there at First Liberty is Trump's nominee should plead the sixth. Jeremy, what's that about?
Well, we've seen this time and time again where nominees are asked in the middle of a committee hearing about their faith and stuff that they have dared to question the reigning orthodoxy. And so they've got this, we talked about earlier, the struggle session moment ahead of them. Do they humiliate themselves as the mob wants them to do, or do they stand for what they actually believe? And I think, unfortunately, too many are kind of humiliating themselves and kind of bowing and saying, well, I'm very sorry for what I wrote. I now recognize the error of my ways for having believed something that has been the central part of Western civilization for most of Western civilization's history. I apologize. They don't need to do that kind of thing. Instead, there is actually a mechanism within our Constitution in Article 6 that says that a religious test for office is off limits. You cannot impose a religious test for office. And yet we still have that happening, whether that's Senator Dianne Feinstein or Cory Booker, Spartacus himself, or if it's other senators. Kamala Harris is one that likes to act like a prosecutor on the stand, but it typically is kind of flailing about trying to get to the actual issues that she really opposes, which are the religious beliefs behind many of these nominees. And so these nominees have a very easy tool at their disposal. They can simply respond with sincerity and I think with seriousness to say, I'm sorry, that question poses a religious test for office, and I'm not under an obligation to answer that question. And so I claim the right, they can say, under the Sixth Amendment to ignore that question. Next question, please.
Yeah.
I think if we could see more people doing that, number one, I think a lot of folks would be very encouraged by that in the heartland. But they would also be encouraged to know that our Constitution is being well respected.
Yeah, Article 6, it was put in there because they didn't want somebody who was a Presbyterian to say, well, you're a Baptist, so you can't serve in office or something like that. And today it's like, if you are a Christian, well, that's enough. Or you're an evangelical, well, that's it. And so I think I plead the sixth. I think that's a great line. We come back, though. I wanted to just talk a little bit about this issue of censorship, because this get to be quite an issue. And I remember years ago we were talking with Craig Parshall. I think some of you know Craig, talking about when he was a lawyer with the National Religious Broadcaster scene censorship. And so Mike Lee and Ted Cruz and some others just said, wait a minute, what's going on here? And they put questions to some of those individuals determining what you can see, read, and hear. So I think we'll come back and talk about that right after this.
This Easter, from 20th Century Fox and Franklin Entertainment comes Breakthrough, starring Chrissy Metz, based on a true story. When Joy Smith's son John falls through an icy Missouri lake, all hope seems lost. But a mother's belief in the power of prayer inspires her community to trust God to do the impossible.
Please, God, send your Holy Spirit to save my son.
Breakthrough, rated PG, parental guidance suggested. In theaters Wednesday, April 17th. Tickets and showtimes available at breakthroughmovie.com.
Ronald Reagan.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
What are you doing to pass on truth and freedom? As one step, have you joined Point of View Radio's Truth Team? If not, why not? Join today. Go to pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. And we'll get into a couple of conversations in just a minute. But let me take one more issue that we've put on the table here. And that is the Senate hearing on censorship by the big tech. And this one is a pretty good summary of what takes place, because you had a number of individuals from Facebook and Twitter in particular. There are going to be some others later on, and they dealt with everything from unplanned. And of course, we've talked about this movie, which had kind of a media blackout, R rating, then a suspended Twitter account and some of that. And we even had the other day the co-director, Carrie Sullivan, on the program. Well, it was Chuck Conselman, who was the other co-director, that was on there talking about this. Then, interestingly enough, Senator Marsha Blackburn, who is, of course, a senator from Tennessee, also confronted the individual from Twitter about the fact that during her campaign, they actually pulled her pro-life ad and received an apology, which, again, that, as we've talked about before, sometimes is very difficult for people to apologize. And then I wanted to hold this one up because here then was one of these other ads, and you got a picture of Mike Lee and Ted Cruz. And, of course, we know Ted Cruz talks about how they blocked one of these particular ads for Susan B. Anthony because it had a quote from, are you ready for this? Mother Teresa. And so there are some, just a few things. And this is something that we've talked about before, first with, of course, Craig Parshall when he was there. But then, Kelly, you brought an individual that actually had documented some of this, even with people like Rush Limbaugh, right?
Yeah, Brian Gottlich, who showed the algorithms, the different things that they were doing to manipulate. And look, I thought the best thing that Brian said, was because I thought everybody can get this, is it used to be that all of our information came through three sources: ABC News, CBS News, NBC News. Right. And then the internet came, and then all changed. And all this information was coming from all these different sources. But now we're going back to three sources: Google, Facebook. It's really dangerous what's happening when all your information is being controlled like this. Now, people complain, they say, well, and even conservatives who are trying to be purist or libertarians or whatever, well, I don't like the idea of calling them monopolies and telling them that they need to stop censoring. We need to let the free market take care of this. Well, that's all well and good, but there's a couple of problems with that. Number one, these are companies who have said they are not censoring. They are not tipping the scale. They're lying to their consumers. And I think they're eventually going to get sued. I think state attorney generals, others are going to eventually take them to task for this, because what they're doing is they're defrauding massive numbers of people. But I go back to the really simple thing here, which I think most people can understand. If a newspaper defames you, says something about you, you can, even though it's somebody else being quoted, like let's say Kerby Anderson says so-and-so, committed tax fraud, and it's in your local newspaper. Well, they can only sue Kerby, right? No, they can sue your newspaper for publishing what Kerby said. Well, why doesn't that apply to Facebook and Google and Twitter and all these different groups? Because Congress gave them an exemption. Why did Congress give them an exemption? They gave them an exemption because they said, look, we're not controlling any content. All we're doing is let people put up their own content. Well, that's a lie. Okay, we now know they are controlling the content. They are using algorithms, and they are stopping things. They're telling, one of our clients was a Baptist church who was told last year at this time that they were being banned from Facebook because why? Because they mentioned Jesus in their Easter ads. Okay? I kid you not. Okay? As you mentioned, Mother Teresa. Yeah. Okay? They are admitting that they are now doing things based on content. So they need to be treated like every other newspaper, every other publisher, and that's the way it should occur. And so now the other way they could deal with this is by getting themselves under control and doing the right thing, being open and honest and saying, here's what we're doing, all that. But if they don't come up with their own policing themselves, they will be policed by the government. I have no doubt in my mind, and this is a really important issue.
Let me quote Ted Cruz, just so you can see kind of the strength there. Ted Cruz said, applying the antitrust law in this area is complicated. But he says by almost any measure, the giant tech companies today are larger and more powerful than Standard Oil was when it was broken up. Then he goes on to say, and they're larger and more powerful than AT&T when it was broken up. And if we have tech companies using the power of monopoly to censor political speech, I think that raises really antitrust issues. I don't still sense anybody around the table that wants government to step in. They would rather that they just do the right thing. But when you start thinking about that, and again, I know for some of our younger audience, they may not have been around when AT&T was broken up, or if they never studied history, don't even know about the breakup of Standard Oil. But the reality is we do have some precedents like that, don't we, Jeremy?
Well, they may not even know what one of the T's stands for in AT&T, for that matter.
That's a good line. But again, this is, I think, just an illustration of something that you've been dealing with for some time. And when you start seeing how, I'll just use, again, the unplanned story, which even though there was a media blackout and they weren't allowed to buy ads, which again, it's a free market. I guess they could do that. Getting an R rating from the MMPPA, which I think was overdone a lot. But then the Twitter account was suspended. And so then we had Colonel Allen West said, well, I got an idea. Let's all write then to the head of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, and his account just filled up. And the next day, all of a sudden, the suspension, he said, was just an accident, and it went live again. So that is the case. But when you have that level of power, it does recognize the fact that maybe government should step in, but I'd rather they just do the right thing. We don't need more government regulations.
We certainly don't. And what we need is individuals in the private sector following the principles of the First Amendment. That has been a great standard for 200 plus years now, that has allowed folks to have an open and honest debate about things. Why not use that standard on things? It's perfectly acceptable for people to have disagreements with one another, but it's not acceptable to censor someone because you disagree with that message on things. So, I mean, that would be my preference of how things were to work out, rather than simply saying, no, we're going to take this away. I even saw that somewhere online somewhere, the movie was listed as not just a drama, but as /propaganda, as a movie category. I didn't realize that propaganda was actually a movie category these days, but this is how they're choosing to put their fingers on the scale in order to portray the worldview that they disagree with in a negative light.
I want to talk about religious liberty, but just before we take a break, since you were talking about movies, here goes the picture of the Bladensburg Cross. But Kelly, you shared something yesterday, and I think our entire audience needs to hear about that, because sometimes this is one of those God things that just about the time you're ready to have the oral arguments on the Bladensburg Cross case, there is this documentary on World War I, They Shall Not Grow Old. And I'm a real history buff, and I've been watching a lot of these black and white documentaries, but this one was colorized. And you just talk about how this was fortuitous, a coincidence, or maybe God-directed, and talk about that.
Yeah, if anybody, the Bladensburg case, which we argued at the Supreme Court about a month ago, is this veterans memorial that's been up for 100 years. It was put up by mothers who lost their sons in World War I in the American Legion, and now there's a lawsuit to have it torn down because it's a cross. And it has the names of the 49 young men who died on that memorial. And it would just be incredible to tear it down. You can't even fathom. Well, 3 weeks before our oral argument, the movie They Shall Not Grow Old came out. And if you've seen it, it's all this World War I, the original film and audio, and they put it all together. They colorized it. It's Peter Jackson, the guy who did Lord of the Rings. One of the best directors in the world. And it's one of the most brutal wars we've ever seen. 14 million dead. And it was brought to life in this movie in a way that's just really, really powerful. And you see the devastation. And I just mentioned that, look, we've been working on this case. This is a huge case that really, I think, could change precedent and be a landmark decision for religious freedom for the future of our country. Stop a lot of the hostility to religion that's been going on. And I said, the idea that this came out 3 weeks before the oral argument, when have you seen a World War I documentary, one that brings emotion and color and all this like this? You probably have never seen it. And people were like, man, you must have had a great relationship with Peter Jackson, the great director. No, this is when it was released because God, I'm convinced, God wanted this out right before to prepare for this Supreme Court argument so people would understand what this is really about.
When we come back from the break, let's talk about why this case is so important, how it could change some of the precedents on the establishment of religion. And even our first article today by interview with David French, he talks about how key this article and this particular court case is. So we'll be back right after this.
Socialism might sound cool to some people right now, but traditionally, Americans have been hostile to it. Historians attribute between 85 and 100 million deaths to 20th century communist regimes. Karl Marx's and Friedrich Engels' socialism, which they described in their Communist Manifesto, resulted in the destruction of livelihoods, forced famine, and political executions. Of this devastation, philosopher and free market advocate Jay Richards writes, "Never has an idea had such catastrophic consequences." Dr. Richards recommends we rely on Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of socialism, a way of organizing a society in which major industries are owned and controlled by the government rather than by individual people and companies. No candidate is specifically advocating that, but politicians are proposing Medicare for all, free college, and a Green New Deal that encompasses several socialist measures. Paying for all this would require ominous tax increases and destroy entrepreneurship and free enterprise. Still, most candidates won't call their proposal socialist. They insist they are recommending needed programs. Is this simply expanding the welfare state, or is it socialism? Washington Post economics columnist Robert Samuelson explains that modern socialism, as opposed to the traditional strain, is mostly about the welfare state. But, he writes, the ultimate goal is similar. It is to control as much of the economy as possible, to advance the agendas of economic and social justice, to edge toward the socialist ideal, from each according to his ability to each according to his need. Mr. Samuelson believes that Americans' broad support for programs such as Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, and unemployment insurance signals that we are socialists. He says both parties are addicted to this socialism. Most candidates won't admit their ideas for drastically expanding government are socialist. As Robert Samuelson concludes, this does not mean we can escape the consequences of moving in this direction. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Point of View, Truth Team 360.
The things that catch my attention are the abortion issue, and it's so important for people to understand the value of life. And to me, that is number one in our lives. And the shows that I've heard on that have impacted. It just gives me kind of a different venue to be able to explain things differently to people. And I have kept in touch with the ministry, and I do donate each month because I feel like it's an important way for people to understand the worldview and that Christ taught. And we have just tried very hard to instill that in our children. Thank you so much for your service, guys, because you do have one.
Point of View. Truth Team 360.
Back once again, and just for the few minutes we have left, let me just mention the first article here. Religious freedom faces threats at the Supreme Court and in mainstream media. It's an interview that they actually did with David French, who's been on the program with us before, but I think it underscores why we need to be praying about this case before the Supreme Court. They refer to it as the Peace Cross case. It's the same case. But David French says this: the Establishment Clause of the U.S. Constitution is probably the most legally perverted clause in the entire Bill of Rights. Examine what the original public meaning of the Establishment Clause is and compare that to the Establishment Clause here. Goes on to say the clause was quite literally prohibiting the establishment of a specific state religion in the same way the British monarch was the head of the church. And then he goes into some of the details. And Kelly, what we're talking about is not just saving the cross. We're talking about changing the way in which the Supreme Court has used a test which has existed, since 1971, I think it was?
Yes.
That is known as the Lemon Test, and we can get into the details, which has prevented anybody from using any kind of sanity when it comes to religion, because we don't know whether a Christmas crèche, a menorah, a cross, a Star of David, or anything is allowed in the public sphere. And you're actually calling for the Supreme Court not only to keep the cross up, but to tear down the Lemon Test, right?
Yeah, the Lemon Test is aptly named. Only, God does that sometimes. Like Senator Flake, I think, was aptly named, right?
What a great line.
It's just amazing how God sort of directs that sometime, like your doctor is Dr. Payne or something. Well, in this case, it's a horrible test. It's not what, almost anybody who reads the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, knows what that really is trying to do. We don't want there to be an established church. We don't want there to be a national Church of England. That's what we're avoiding, because we don't want that, because then people will be coerced to support that. And that's what the Establishment Clause is about, sort of a positive coercion, okay? The Free Exercise Clause is about negative coercion, that they interrupt your free exercise. So really what the Establishment Clause is about is no national church and no coercion by the government to violate your religion, your religious beliefs. Well, that's not what Lemon says. The Lemon Test brings in all these other concepts that were never in the Constitution. Separation of church and state and all these different things. Well, separation of church and state, where basically what this means is anytime government is anywhere, religion can't be there. Well, government's everywhere now. So this is why you see this hostile government kind of, we got to take down the nativity scene because let's get out the measuring tape. It's not within 10 feet of the Rudolph. Okay. What an embarrassment for the Supreme Court.
I'd say so.
This is embarrassing for them. This is not what the Constitution says. It's a bad test. It's what causes them to go after veterans memorials and 10 Commandments and everything else. So in this case, we said, you don't just need to protect this memorial. You need to get rid of this test because it's caused so much damage and is creating so much confusion. And I don't know that we said this directly, but it's embarrassing for you as a court to even be doing this. It's really beneath the court. And so I feel like we had 5 votes during the oral argument. The key vote will probably be Chief Justice Roberts. And really what's going on now is there's opinions being shared back and forth, and the liberals on the court are trying to convince the conservatives on the court, you don't have to get rid of Lemon. We'll just join you and uphold this memorial as long as you don't get rid of Lemon. And I just hope the 5 stay strong, and people need to pray because this is spiritual warfare. Because this creates a government that really creates an air of hostility to religion, which is not what the founders meant. If we get rid of it, we'll go back to what the founders meant, which is they're going to say, is this a national church? Are you being coerced with regard to your religion? Then we're okay with religion. We're okay with crosses and menorahs, and we like religious freedom. It will return our country to something we've never really had in our lives, which is when religion occurs in public, we don't tense up and think there's something wrong. We say, well, if there's no coercion by the government, that's good. Yeah. So be in prayer. I encourage people, be in prayer, because this is all being decided. It'll probably come out in late June. Very important case.
And Jeremy, one of the things that we've also said is it's just so confusing, even for lawyers, much less non-lawyers. And just to think of the amount of pieces of paper, how many trees have had to die, and how much length of time just to deal with something, frankly, as simple as a cross case.
Yeah,
right?
Far too many. I mean, the appendix alone was in 4 different volumes of this thing. And I wanted you to think of your town council, right? Wherever you may be living, whether that's in a big town or a little town. Do you think that they're going to have trouble trying to figure out whether or not, like Kelly was saying, the nativity scene is close enough to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer to make sure that it's neutral enough?
This is crazy.
We shouldn't have to go through those leaps and bounds. You shouldn't have to go all the way through law school and sit on the Supreme Court of the United States, for that matter, to be a city councilman in Dubuque, Iowa. That shouldn't be a problem here. It's permissible. It's perfectly okay to acknowledge religion within the public square. But because the Establishment Clause has been, and I'm going to use the word from David French that's in this article, because the Establishment Clause has been so badly perverted over the years, people think that the mere acknowledgement of religion on the public square is a violation of the First Amendment. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It is not. And it is perfectly acceptable for the state of Ohio to have a Star of David on its Capitol grounds. It is perfectly acceptable for the state of Texas to have the 10 Commandments on their state grounds. We thought it would be on the same day acceptable for the state of Kentucky to have a 10 Commandments monument there as well. But there again shows the craziness that is our Establishment Clause. It's okay for Texas to do it, but not okay for Kentucky. This doesn't make any sense at all. So it makes it very difficult for local officials, city councilmen, county commissioners, school board members to know, how is the Establishment Clause going to be violated, and what is that going to cost me and my taxpayers if we do? And so rather than trying to defend anything, they get a nasty gram from one of the angry acronyms of the week, and they just simply throw up their arms and say, well, forget it. We'll just stop it right now, and we'll tear down a memorial to World War I veterans, or we'll destroy a 10 Commandments monument with or without someone driving a pickup truck at 80 miles an hour.
Wow.
You know, it's crazy that we would get to this level where we think that this Veterans Memorial, erected by mothers of men who died in World War I, is somehow an establishment of religion right there in the middle of the highway in Bladensburg, Maryland. It is not. It is a way for us to remember the supreme sacrifice that these men paid defending our freedom.
Let me just mention that this article that is an interview with David French is on our website, but if you go to firstliberty.org, upper right-hand corner, it says cases. The first one is the Charlie Brown Christmas case. So you already know that one. Bladensburg, which we just talked about, the Kleins, and Coach Kennedy. And you can go all the way down and learn about every one of those. But those top 4 are the ones we've been talking about. And frankly, the ones you should be praying about, because who knows, you may actually find out today or tomorrow or Monday about Aaron and Melissa Klein. And we'll be waiting for another month or two for the decision on the Bladensburg case. Guys, I really appreciate you being here. And Kelly, congratulations on 30 years of being involved in ministry. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for doing it.
That's all we have for today, and I hope you have a great weekend. I want to thank Andrew and Steve for the help behind the scenes. We've got a full packed interviews next week right here on Point of View. We'll see you then.
It's amazing but true. When it comes to one of America's biggest household expenditures, healthcare, a lot of people think they've got no choice. People are used to thinking we have to do it this way, but they don't. Yes, you have the freedom to choose an alternative with your healthcare. It's MediShare, and it costs way less than the alternatives. The typical family saves $500 a month, not a year, a month. And if you're single, this can save you a lot too. And let's face it, a big reason MediShare is 400,000 people strong, it just works. They've shared over $3 billion in medical bills, so they can help share your needs too. Joining MediShare for so many people is one of those things that makes you say, why didn't I do this before? So yes, the time has come for something better. Look into joining MediShare and see why so many people are opting out of the old way and into the new. Why not look into this? Just call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
It takes a team to win. Be part of Point of View's Truth Team and bring truth and healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.